Today we're going to be talking about how we did the cinematography for Fanfan's new music video for Fool. So the camera that we chose to shoot this on was the FX6, and then the lens choice that we went with was the Atlas Lens Co. Mercury Series anamorphic lenses. We got the 36mm, 42, and 72mm. We kind of went with that just since it gave us a slightly wider frame, although we did have to crop in a little bit because the original ratio was going to be 2.66, and that was just a little bit too wide for my liking, and I think 239 is a little bit better while still giving you that wider frame. As far as the FX6 goes, the FX6 I think is a really, it's just a great camera overall, and I feel like it was perfect for this budget level and for this music video. If you shoot S-Log3 in Cine EI, then you're gonna get more than enough latitude to work with in post and be able to produce an image that looks really cinematic. Taking my time is just so looking at this, originally I did want to get closer to her lips, but since we decided to go with the anamorphics, they don't have a close focusing distance. So we opted for more of this medium or close-up, I guess you could say, framing, which I was okay with. The main goal for this shot was just to start the Steadicam at the beginning, and then as she starts off these first few verses, then it pulls back and kind of reveals more of the cabin that she's in. We pretty much want to set the scene for this video so that you kind of get an idea of what the feeling is going to be. This was one of the main shots that I really wanted to get. And so when we were planning out how we were going to shoot this, the lighting was definitely going to be key for this, especially with such a wide frame. We didn't have any room to add any lights, like at the top here. And the ceilings or on the side were pretty low too, so it would be pretty tough to add lights in there. So for this shot, when we did the location scout, the main thing that I saw for the lighting was that there was hard light coming in through these windows. And as we shot during the day, the sun was gonna be pretty much in front of us that whole time, so as time went on, we knew pretty much where the sun was going to be. So the sun, I knew, so for whenever I'm thinking about lighting and where to add the lights for placement, I'm trying to think, you know, the first thing that I want to do is think about where the sun is. And the reason for that is since we already know that there was going to be this sunlight coming in and hitting the floor here, I didn't want to fight or work against that. And so that part of the lighting was already going to be covered by the sun. Although at the beginning of the day, at the beginning of the shoot, which is when this shot happens, the sun didn't really play too much into the shot, so we probably could have added a light. It probably would have been from this direction, but because we have this sunlight coming through and we had no way to block it off, then you're just going to get some pools of light that are kind of running in the opposite direction. And when I'm thinking about how realistic the lighting is going to be for that situation, I feel like it doesn't look right. And so we left that alone. So we left the sunlight in, and then I knew that we were going to need to key her. And so as far as the key for all this right here, so essentially because we didn't have any time to do like a whole 6x6 frame. I don't remember if it was 6x6 or 8x8, but either way it was a frame that we didn't have time to set up. Nick ended up setting up a T-bar frame for the silk, and we had that on a combo stand. And because it wasn't really windy at all, it was pretty much no problem to have it set up like that. We did end up tying off on each of the corners at the bottom as just some sandbags, just in case it did get windy, but it never really became an issue. So on the outside here, shooting pretty much a large pool of soft light was a T-bar, and then I think we ended up putting 2 layers of diffusion on because I thought the full was going to be too much, but I think it ended up coming out to about a full stop of diffusion. So it was like, or somewhat pretty close to that. And then we had a 1200D shooting through that. So we had a 1200D because, again, we're trying to expose as much as we can for the outside so that we still have some kind of detail there in the background. So we needed a more powerful light, so we ended up using the 1200D. And I feel like, you know, if you go with a more powerful light and you need to cut some of it down, you always have that option. But if you don't have enough light, then you end up just not having enough light. And then you end up having to overexpose windows, and it just doesn't look as good to me. So we have this 1200D on the right side, hitting through this diffusion, creating as much of a soft light as we can coming in through the window. And for this kind of scene, it made sense to me because, you know, you have the hard light coming from the windows, but you still have that soft light in any other windows that are gonna be around this vicinity. That's gonna be pretty much the ambient sunlight that's hitting outside and coming in. So we have that. And then the last thing that we wanted to add was this this backlight hitting against this stained glass window. And so what we ended up doing was adding a, I believe it was a Grouthes light. I think it was like a 600 watt equivalent. So he had the Grouthes light there, and then we pretty much just put it on a combo stand and had that shooting inwards this way. And also another reason why we wanted to add that light was because we wanted to add a little bit of haze into the room, and so that helped create some rays, a little bit of a ray of light coming into the scene. So shooting anamorphic lenses creates a couple of its own problems, mainly because of how wide the lens is. You're having to avoid being able to see any lights that come into your scene. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, on the right side, where the 1200D is, when the Steadicam would pull back and whenever it would kind of veer to the right side, you would see our setup there. So honestly, we kind of needed an even more powerful light or even a second 1200D. And if we were able to push it back even more, then that wouldn't have been an issue at all. And we still could have retained kind of that power that we needed for that key light. And second, because we were so wide, on the left side window, we were able to see that 600D coming into play. On the 600D, there were barn doors on there, so it kind of looked like the sun if you weren't really looking at it, but if you paid attention to it, you could definitely see the barn door sticking out, and so it looked like a light. Luckily, we had plenty of takes where we had the Steadicam raised a little bit higher above eye level, and so that wasn't an issue. So going back to what he was talking about with how wide this frame is, because it's so wide, these are those windows that I was talking about to the right side. We ended up seeing that side. On the first take of this shot, we ended up seeing all the equipment that we had laid out on the balcony, and so we ended up having to move that. So that's just something to keep in mind. You have a little bit more real estate, so you gotta make sure that the frame is super clean. And one advice I would say, if you're ever on a shoot like that, and you're thinking, well, will I see it? Do you think it's gonna be a problem? You probably should just move all the equipment to a space where it definitely won't be seen, because that's time and resources that's taken away when you can't use a shot because there's equipment in frame. And that's something that happened with us, and it could have been fixed if we were like, hey, let's just set everything on the side of the house, and then we just have to grab it over there. And I will say it's hard to think about though, because we had such a small crew. Mm-hmm. So I mean, things get missed, but you know, you live and you learn. Yeah. So let's move on to the next shot. Life that I just couldn't keep around me. Feels like I only drown in your arms. So I guess let's go run back to this. I wanted to talk about this next scene transition. Okay, so this is, on this Steadicam shot, it's transitioning into this next scene, or this next room that we're gonna be shooting into. I bring this shot up because there's a couple things that I would have done different as far as this composition. I think what we should have done, we were a little bit pressed for time, and during our location scout, we only had like 10 minutes to look through the location, so it was very difficult to kind of visualize everything that we were going to need. But for this shot, I think what I would have done different would have been to add some sort of soft light, either soft light or a hard light, and kind of coming through across the frame just to add some lift to this exposure on this foreground, and just to make it a little bit more interesting. But because the shot is moving, it's not too big of a deal. And ideally with that light going through, it would have looked like it was coming through a window or something. That way it's not like, it wouldn't look too sourcey. But like you said, we just ran out of time on that. I mean, we barely had any time to light that next scene, which was the main shot that we needed for that scene, and we weren't even able to do the full light setup that we had planned for it. Yeah, we shot this entire music video in around 5 hours, at least with the artist for 5 hours, and then we had like an hour and a half before then to shoot some B-roll. Okay, so at the end of the day, so this is the last shot that we did for the shoot. I really wanted to shoot in this bathroom. I really like the windows that were here. The windows have like some color on them. It's hard to tell, but we were hoping that would play on her for a shot. And at the end of the day, we were actually kind of scrambling because we were like, let's think of a shot. We need a shot. We need something that is different, that, you know, is just something that is gives us the ability to have more footage to edit with. And so that's why we kind of landed in the bathroom, because we were like, well, this is easy. We can definitely make this look good. And yeah, we just went from there. This shot ended up probably being the most controversial as far as like opinions surrounding the shot. We really weren't thinking about it that much. Like, we just thought it looked pretty. Yeah. But it was one of the first shots that would get mentioned every time anyone would see it. But for this shot, it wasn't really my first pick as far as like the block, like the placement. But I really wanted to utilize these windows here. And I felt like on the right side of this bathroom were some interesting things to look at. And then also opposite, looking into this door, when the doors were closed, they had some interesting texture to it that was kind of opaque and partially see-through, and I thought that would have been cool to play on, but we just didn't have time to do and figure out like a different shot like that. So this one ended up being the easiest because we have this window next to her, and so we'll just talk about what we ended up doing. We ended up placing her inside of the tub, but one thing that I didn't realize was that behind her, it's a tray for like your shampoo, your soap, but also the faucet. Mm-hmm. And I guess I don't know why I didn't see that last time, but I thought we could just, I thought it was just like just a tray that you could like move to this edge, or just take it off so she'd have more room to lay down in, but ended up not being able to move it at all. And so that's why she looks so tiny in this. That's why the tub looks really tiny, because she's only halfway up into it. And I think if she had some more room, it maybe would have looked more natural with her laying back, but that faucet was in the way, so we just made that work. And looking back, you know, it's probably a design thing. Like, most people probably wouldn't be sitting in that direction. They would be turned in the other direction with their legs under that tray. So it would give them a lot more room to be in the bathtub. Mm-hmm. And so for this shot, what we did was we added a little bit of haze because we noticed some sunlight was streaming in. And so the haze helped highlight that. And then we had our brother Ello. He was outside of the windows with a Titan tube, just Hollywooding it. And with the Titan tube, it provided just enough power that, you know, it was playing on her right side of her face, but, you know, ideally we would have wanted something that was a little bit more powerful and a little bit more softer, because it's just hard to compete with the natural light, with the tube light like that outside. But it still worked out. It still played a little bit on there. Gave us just enough what we needed. Yeah. So that was pretty much all we did for this lighting setup. And then in post, when I was doing the color grading, I just took like a power window, made a rectangle, and then I pretty much just darkened the exposure a bit on the sides, just a little bit, just so that she would be highlighted a bit more. And going back to the doors that closed, another shot that we were thinking of doing with those doors, because they were the same material, well, like the same almost opaqueness as that window in the back, we could have done like a cool silhouette shot, but again, ran out of time. if we wanted to do that silhouette shot, we would have needed a really powerful light in the back, because there really wasn't, I don't know if there would be even room to put a very bright light that could shine on her whole body. I feel like the light would actually have to be like behind the window outside, so that it could cover her all the way. But again, ran out of time. That's just how it goes.
My thoughts are cloudy. Maybe you should stay here instead to fall in your arms.
So that was the next scene that she was walking into, and she ends up sitting down. We just ended up cutting that out. All right, so for this shot, if you remember looking back as she's doing this walk up, it looks like above her there's like a low ceiling, and what that actually was a loft. And that loft had like a little mini, I think it was like a mini cushion that you could sit down or lay on. It looked like a half bed or something up there. Yeah, but it basically provided a perfect platform to hide and place a light. And so just above frame, we had I believe it was a 300D, and we had that on a hyper reflector just bouncing into the ceiling and kind of towards the wall that's on the right on screen. Yeah, bouncing towards a white wall that's to the right. I think ideally, if I were to do this again, I think what I would have done was place an F21, F21X or F22X right there, and had that shooting more sidey towards her, especially because we already have all of this sunlight already shooting in that same direction. And you could see it even on the wall right there. But I think my main worry for doing that was that we had these windows here, and I was worried that the F21 or F22 wasn't gonna give us enough lift in order to compete with that outside ambient light. I think we probably would have ended up being fine for that. We could have boomed it closer to her. But again, we were also tight on time, so we didn't want to make Nick have to rig all that up on the amount of time that we had, especially because we had some other shots that we needed to get to. Yeah, we were cut for time. Like we only had time to set up this 300D, and you know, for anyone that set that up before, like that's quick, and that's all we had time for was that. And you know, we had a light diagram and kind of had a general idea of how we were going to light this scene, but kind of threw that out the window and had to find out a solution like really, really fast. Yeah. But I wouldn't say it threw it out the window. We just had to kind of tweak it to fit the circumstance that we were in. Yeah. So basically this was the shot. It was just one light bouncing to the right onto the ceiling, just to kind of lift her and kind of give her a little bit more exposure. The reason why I wanted to avoid that too is because I wanted to spotlight her more on the bed, and I tried to be careful of not exposing the entire space too much. I think what I ended up doing, I might have added a power window around her, maybe more of like an oval, and then I think I tracked it and then reduced the exposure just a touch on the outside. Everything else you can't even really tell, but it does help kind of pull her a little bit more out of the frame, just a tiny bit. So, and on this shot, I actually think that on the 300D, even though it was pointed at the wall with the hyperreflector, I think we actually put the silk from the dome over that reflector because it was a little bit too hard, and so adding that silk kind of softened up that light a little bit more. Yeah. Coming up on this part in the music video that I wanted to talk about. Tell me why it's just so hard to say I'm coming home. Is it worth it? So this was a really simple lighting setup to do. We were basically utilizing the light setups that we had and making them work in our favor. So in that first scene, we had the 1200D setup with the silk on the T-bar. And so, you know, we're not gonna try and rig something entirely up just for this next scene when we could literally just rotate the light 90 degrees. We didn't rotate it exactly like that, but you know, you get the idea. We used that light and we used that silk to give her this key light. So the silk, we used that 6x6 diffusion, the same one that we had outside on that balcony. We just shifted it and turned it towards the kitchen. This was a really small location. It was like a little cabin that we found on Pier Space, and I really wanted to utilize as much of the different spots that it offered just because it was a really nice location, quite expensive too. So I wanted to make full use of it. And so for this shot, we had that 6x6. I think like I said, it was full silent grid, and the 1200D, and just had it shooting all through the windows. And then that was pretty much providing all of this key on her face. And then we didn't add anything on the right side. It was just pretty much, I liked where the shadows, how they looked. We didn't need to add any neg or any additional fill, so. And then, you know, when you're shooting with the light on the left side, it lets you shoot on shadow side. And that's, you know, shadow side is always gonna give you the most interesting look for when you're shooting on your camera, because it gives you a better idea of the shape of someone's face, and it just looks the most interesting. I'm trying so hard not to say cinematic, but that's what it looks like. And I think something different, if we really wanted to tweak this a little bit, is we would have put like a bulb like in that lamp maybe, or even just turned it on. I don't think we even tried to turn it on the day of. Yeah, so yeah, I was just about to bring that up. Yeah, the lamp I forgot was even there, this one.
Yeah, it's kind of hidden.
So yeah, like you said, the lamp right here, I forgot that was there. We could have turned that on. Nick had I think he had his B7Cs, so we literally could have had that lit. But I still like the shot. I think again, I might have done some tweaks with the color grade to enhance more of her. But I didn't really do too much in the color. The main thing was just we used Tom Bowles Cineprint, and then I just tweaked some of the colors so that we got a little bit of green in the shadows.
And did you turn off the halation?
Yeah, I turned off the halation because I feel like it's a little bit much. I probably could have added like a touch of it, but I just left it off. Yeah, kind of for a lot of our edits, we kind of just turn off the halation. I mean, if there's some kind of video where it calls for it to look exactly like, you know, 16mm film, then I'll leave it on. But for most of the time, we just want that, really we just want the grain, and we want that like filmic kind of texture on there. But yeah, there's not really much else to say about this shot. We just wanted a large source of light hitting into the windows, especially because for her blocking, she's walking this way. So we wanted to make sure that she was consistently lit as she walked with the Steadicam. This was a similar case to the kitchen light. We literally just utilized that same large source. It was a little bit tougher because we're shooting on the same side that the sun is shooting in. So again, you're having to fight that natural light with your own lights. So it's hard to get, you know, the shape that you wanted. 1200D kind of shooting at that general angle. Had to be careful of Steadicam coming around this way because she would end up blocking up just a little bit of the light, and you could tell that the levels would change, but it wasn't really a huge deal. But pretty much just the ambient light that was coming from outside, and then adding to that with the 1200D. And then the second light that we had was up here, just outside behind this wall. We had, I think Nick was holding either a Titan tube or one of his Amaran tubes, but we had a tube light right there. And that was set to, I think, 3200 Kelvin, I think. And you can kind of tell a little bit here that it's just a little bit lit. It's easier to tell when it gets close up to her. But yeah, I think ideally we would have wanted like either two of them, or like just some kind of light that's a little bit brighter, or has some kind of spotlight attachment, just something to give her more of an edge light, but it still plays in there. At least for us, we knew that we wanted to do a frame within the frame. And so by the time we got to this part of the shoot, I was looking everywhere at where we could do that. And we got one where she has the plane and she's playing with it. But then when I turned and looked towards the kitchen, which is where this is, I realized that this was perfect for our second frame and within a frame shot. Just something to give it more interest and something in the video that would look nice. And so I told her to basically lay her head down right here and bend over. I told her to lay down.
Pause.
And for her, it was really uncomfortable. If you were on the other side of this, it would look really awkward and funny, but from our angle of the camera, it looks perfect.
Yeah, even for her, you know, I think she mentioned that it feels weird being in that position, but, you know, what other people see or how you feel doesn't necessarily translate the same as what you see on camera.
And the shot turned out pretty much perfect. And I think a lot of people, when they were reacting to this, really loved this shot.
And really the only change that we made to it post-edit was there was this big light switch.
So the light switch was here before, and he had taken it out first, but then when I sent it over to the editor, he went ahead and did it. Zach went ahead and did his own removal of the light switch, and that's what we ended up using. And yeah, pretty much looks like there was no switch there. And we literally did nothing for the lighting on this. That was all the sun coming this way. And even though we were in the same direction of the sun, all of this, right, you could consider as flat lighting just because we're shooting in the same direction. But because she's in this window and there's this dark region here and we're framed up within this square, and then she has some of this shadow covering her face while still having some pools of like highlight. I feel like it was enough to still make the shot look interesting. And as long as you have some different areas of the shot where some of it's dark and some of it's lit, then I feel like you can still create an interesting frame, even though our key light was technically in the same direction as where we were shooting.
Yeah, I'm always an advocate of like, you know, I feel like some people might try to adjust this frame by like getting a soft light on her somehow. But like sometimes it's cool when you have like these pockets of light in there. And I feel like for framing and for getting your shot selection, like it looks the most natural when you can't tell that a light is being used. And so if there's any way that you can recreate it or just use the sun to your advantage, then I would definitely, you know, do that.
And then we still even got an eye light in her eyes, even though we didn't use any light. And I think that was just literally from the reflection of the sunlight hitting the countertop.
And if you're ever like framing up a shot, I think it's always a good idea to remove like things like that light switch, anything to help out your framing. And it's the easiest to do that if you can set your camera on a tripod. It's a lot harder to do it with moving shots.
So this was the other frame within a frame shot that we did. And so it was just a 1200D on the left side, same setup, just shooting through that window. And then we had shadow side on the right side. And even though we had the sunlight shooting against this window, ended up not really being a problem. I think our 1200D ended up being brighter than we thought we needed it to be, so that helped a lot.
Yeah, so another thing to point out is that it's wintertime, or winter for Texas, and so naturally the sun it's not gonna hit that midday high where it's like right above you. Pretty much all day the sun is gonna stay like, I don't know what angle that is, like it's never hitting people right above them where it's really super unflattering.
So for this shot, we recorded in 48 frames per second in S&Q and then played it back at 24, so. That resulted in her moving in slow-mo, and then she was singing the song 2 times as fast, so when we brought it in and slowed it down, then it was already done in camera because we were in S&Q, then she was singing the lyrics in real time. So
it gives it this like ethereal kind of feeling because, you know, you're looking at the image and everything's telling you like this is slow-mo, but then you look at her lips and she's singing it in real time. And that's the effect that we wanted for this specific video because of just the type of song that it was. And it makes it feel dreamy and like this, it's like this other world. And it was funny seeing streamers react to it because not every streamer would realize what was happening, but a couple of them would be like,
wait a minute, something's off here, and it was just cool to see that. Foosley, I think she was the only one that was kind of explaining it to her chat. It was one of them, one of the streamers, but yeah, that was cool. Yeah, I mean, it was such a short, we cut up this shot a little bit, so it's hard to tell that it's happening. I think if we had stayed on it for a bit longer, then people would notice it more. But I mean, it was just a little touch to add to the video. So she's moving in slow-mo, singing in real time. For the lighting in this shot, kept it very simple again. Utilized the sunlight. The sunlight's hitting towards this way. So that's just sunlight.
And then the opal.
Then we had Nick with an opal frame, much higher than this, but it was pretty much just taking the edge off the sunlight. And you can kind of see how the light gets a little bit softer against her face coming this way. It's not super apparent because you can, but you can see that there is a little bit of shadow here. And then just so that we could utilize the sunlight as she's walking in this frame, but so that it wasn't super harsh. And this was a combination of being limited on crew, but also logistically, we didn't have any power in that area. You know, we would have to run long stingers just to get a light out there. So, you know, with the time crunch and all of that, we just had to utilize the sun the best that we could. And that's pretty much what's gonna happen for these next couple of shots, is just, you know, how can we make the sun look good on her? So we're on this wide shot of her laying on the grass. Again, I wanted something that looked different and framed and compositionally was gonna stand out. So we had her lay down on here. The only thing that we utilized was, again, the sun was coming in from this direction. And then we had Nick place an opal to pretty much take the edge off. And because of this angle that we're at, you can't even tell that there's this 4x4 frame of opal hitting her, because at this angle, it pretty much meshes in with the rest of the shadows that are in the grass. So couldn't tell that there was a frame there, worked out to our favor. I really like using the sun, but sometimes you do want to take a little bit of the edge off. And so that's what we did for this. And there's also a sandbag propped behind her head, and we just hid that with, you know, just moving her hair around. Mm-hmm. And then for the overall, when I did the color, I just did a power grade, just like in that general area, and then darkened pretty much the entire outside, just a touch. I try not to overdo any sort of indenting, just to do what I need to kind of help bring out the subject of the shot. And again, going back to the sun, you know, you want to kind of try and avoid shooting midday because of the light being overhead of a lot of different objects. It not only makes it a lot more unflattering, but it makes it harder for people to put up diffusion because you're having to set up frames on stands, and, you know, people aren't tall enough, so, you know, you have to have it on stands. And so again, because it's winter time, the sun is always at an angle where it's not overhead. It's a lot more flattering, and you could even tell on the leaves that the direction of the shadow just looks nice. And it was pretty much like that the whole day, which is kind of an advantage of shooting in the winter time. So this is probably one of my favorite shots that we did. And we just went in for a close-up. And same thing, I'm not even gonna draw out anything. But same direction, we had the opal, we just pulled it in closer just to bring up the exposure more. You can tell, okay, I guess I will draw on it. You can tell that there's eye light.
You can even draw on the edge.
And you could probably see a little bit that that's the opal right there. And that's the opal.
And you could even tell, you can even draw it out right here. On that edge of the shadow, that's where the frame of the opal ended. But you know,
so the frame of the opal is actually right here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. And then there's I think there's a tree or something that kind of had a little bit more shadow in this section. So,
but you can't even tell. Like for me, I can tell just because we were there. But for anyone else watching, like, you don't know that's a frame right there.
Mm-hmm. I think everyone's would be more focused on like the actual subject, that doesn't even become super important. I mean, in an ideal world, I guess if you could try to find a way to like feather out that shadow even more, then that would be nice. But I mean, in real life, sometimes you have trees and stuff, and that kind of creates the shadows, so it's not really a big deal. But yeah, very simple shot. Not really much to it besides just doing high angle and then hiding her hair, hiding the sandbag with her hair.
Yeah, luckily her hair is like a darker color, even though it's not like completely back, but the fact that her hair is darker, it made it easier to hide that bag.
Yeah, you could even see the bag, the edge of the bag right there. Just a little bit.
To fall in your arms would keep me so long.
This is the last shot we're gonna talk about for this. I don't even think we used the opal for this. We just utilized the hard sunlight coming in from this direction again. Right there, yep. And I like using the sun a lot because you can play around with the direction that it's hitting your subjects. And so for her, she was kind of being side lit by it. A little bit of edge almost. And for the actual the actual light that was hitting on this direction of her face, I believe we were bouncing.
Yeah, so he had essentially a floppy, but it was ultra bounce. So on one side it's black and on one side it's white. So you can utilize, using either bounce or a negative fill.
So we just used the ultra bounce on the left side to give some fill to her face. I try not to overdo it with the lighting. On these particular kind of shots where the sun is coming in as a side or backlight, because realistically in real life, this part of her face is pretty much going to be in shadow because there's not really going to be too much bouncing. I mean, if you're in an urban environment, might have some bounce on buildings or maybe something on the ground with some bright rocks or something. A rock face might be bouncing light into her face. But in general, you're not really going to see that. And you'll see in a lot of movies, sometimes they'll go for a stylistic choice just because, you don't want it to be dark. They'll just go ahead and light that side of the face up. But I just went with a bounce approach just to add some lift and a little bit of fill to her face and not try to overdo it. My least favorite bounce to use would probably be like the 5-in-1s with the gold or silver because
they really stick out. You can tell.
It's just obvious that it's bounce light. And I think the only way to kind of help, it is good in a pinch because they can output so much light and help fill in these shadows when you're shooting this way. But I would almost opt to shoot it through an opal or something to kind of break up the light a bit more. But yeah, sometimes it's just too much for something like this. I just want it to be as close to realistic as possible with it still being lit, if that makes sense.
And one thing to keep in mind when you're shooting, with the sun, it definitely helps if you can see in the background we have a lot of dark things. Like we have trees, we have the fence in the back, and shooting against a dark background will kind of help you be able to expose your image at a better level. Because if the background was a lot of white or it was a lot of concrete, the sun hitting that, it's gonna really brighten up that area, and it's so hard to compete with that and still have your subject with the right level of exposure that you want. So it definitely looks a lot nicer if you can find a way to shoot with a dark background.
So yeah, overall, I would say that for the lighting method for this project, I definitely tried to go for more of like a realistic lighting theory approach, if that makes sense. I try to think about how in the real world lighting would look like and then basically try to replicate and enhance that a bit. I try to think about where the sun is hitting, where the ambience of the sun is going to be coming through, and how that affects a frame.
Also, what sort of objects is the light passing through? Is it passing through like windows? Is it passing through branches? A lot of times light sources aren't just going to be uninhibited by any kind of structure. Like it's always going to be passing through some sort of window or some sort of like object. If you just look at your window in your house, the light is having to go through blinds. It's having to go through a lot of different objects before it hits a certain area.
Yeah, even going through a window, sometimes I'll see like light hitting the grass, and that light that's hitting the grass bouncing into the window can cause a green hue to kind of appear in the lighting. And so that's just like small things to think about when you're deciding how you want to do lighting. is just to be aware of those things.
So yeah, if you have any questions about any of the cinematography or about any of the framing, anything related to that, just go ahead and comment down below, or you can email us at team@madlightfilms.com. If you have a project that you want to shoot, or if you have a music video that you want to shoot, then go ahead and message us with that inquiry too. But anyways, as always, if you like the video, please like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next one.